This Week with Rick Casey is made possible by the generous support of the William and Salome Scanlon Foundation, supporting educational, environmental, and Hispanic cultural initiatives, and the John and Florence Newman Foundation, encouraging an informed community, and visionaries like members of KLRN.
I'm Rick Casey, and this is Texas Week. The March 4th primary election will soon be upon us. We here at Texas Week are helping you to get to know the lead candidates. Tonight, we focus on the Republican race for the 23rd Congressional District. Evan Smith, editor-in-chief of the Texas Tribune, joins me with his take on the GOP lieutenant governor's debate. And in my last word, I'm with Henry. Let people die before we canonize them. Texas Week starts now.
This week's most important stories, people, and issues in depth. This is Texas Week with Rick Casey.
Early voting for the March 4th primary elections begin in less than 3 weeks. Tonight we focus on the Republican race for the District 23 congressional seat, which may be Texas's only competitive congressional race in November's general election. The 23rd is geographically the largest congressional district in the United States. It stretches from San Antonio down to the Mexican border and west all the way to El Paso County. 2 years ago, Democrat Pete Gallego of Alpine defeated Republican incumbent Francisco Kiko Canseco of San Antonio. Mr. Canseco wants the seat back, but he faces 2 Republicans from San Antonio in the primary. They are both with us tonight. Robert Lowry is a physician. Will Hurd, a former CIA officer, was edged out by Canseco in the 2010 primary. We invited Mr. Canseco to appear as well, but he chose not to. One of the things I want to do is talk about, obviously you both don't like the way things are going on in Washington. You both have a lot to say about the incumbent, Pete Gallego. But tonight what we're talking about is why voters should choose one of you to run against Canseco. So, against Gallego. So to begin with, I just want to ask the general question of why should our viewers vote for you rather than either of the other 2 candidates? We'll start with you, Rob.
I believe I have a great chance to win the general election. As a physician, with Obamacare and all these other things hitting us like that, I actually understand what's going wrong with the system and how it could easily be fixed, really, if we would get government out of it. I've been in the district as a physician for 20 years. I work on the south side in the Hispanic community, been there for years, and been out through the district in various ERs as well. So I understand the district well. I believe I understand my history. I believe I understand what's going wrong with D.C., and that we have to bring some folks up there who aren't going to compromise on their ethics, but allow a compromise for the details, as long as we're doing the right thing first.
Okay, Will, why you rather than either of the other 2?
Sure, Rick. I think the best way to answer this question is to talk about what it would look like if Representative Hurd is in Washington, D.C. I'm going to actually have an impact on policy even as a freshman because of my background. I'd likely be on the House Intelligence Committee, and since I spent almost a decade in the CIA, in India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, I have direct impact and knowledge of some of the biggest issues that we face, things like what's going on with the NSA and making sure the NSA is protecting the privacy of our citizens as well as going after terrorists. Talk about what really happened with Benghazi, and also looking at the biggest issue, I think, of our day, the national debt, and putting it into an international perspective.
Okay, well, since you mentioned the NSA, I believe you're on record as saying that you would likely curtail some of the activities of the NSA. What would you see ought to be different? We've learned an awful lot because of Mr. Snowden doing something that apparently is illegal, but we've learned a lot from
it. Clearly, our government's taken over authority that it has none of. And in the process of supposedly securing us, it is now our problem. Our federal government is actually our biggest security risk to us. I believe that the founders set it up that we have a diffuse government. That if somebody were to actually capture or do something to Washington, D.C., take out everybody there, we would still run because we're a diffuse nation. You couldn't just take over the king's spot and fall for it. And
so how would you cut back what they're doing? They're just sweeping up all this data.
Right.
How would you limit them?
Well, we would have to, as Congress, actually put something forth that the president's going to listen to, because really I don't think Congress has ever given the president this authority. And within that, he has now allowed these agencies to take over where they don't have authority to act. Congress passed the NDAA a few years ago, which essentially then did give the authority to the president to arrest people in that, and clearly that's not what we're supposed to be standing for.
Well, what would you do?
Sure. I was an undercover officer in the CIA. I fought the Taliban. I fought Al-Qaeda. I know what is at risk when it comes to the global war on terrorism. Terrorists are trying to do two things. They're trying to kill a lot of people, and they're trying to elicit responses in our government that upset a majority of the population. When 46% of the population thinks something is wrong, we need to stop doing it. So what I would do is go to the NSA and say, listen, guys, you got to curtail this. You got to protect people's privacy. Because when you do something that upsets the people you're trying to protect...
I'm sorry, but as a junior congressman, a freshman congressman, is the NSA going to listen to you? Or don't you have to pass a law that would take care of it?
Well, I think they would listen to me, one, because I'll likely be on the House Intelligence Committee. I understand their business. I've worked with the NSA when I was in the CIA, and also I worked to pass legislation that actually curtails what their activities are. And I would know how to do it to where we protect our citizens' privacy, but also give them the tools that they need to be effective.
While we're on that topic, Will, on your website, you say that we should, and I'm quoting from your website, treat drug cartels the way we treat the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. The image that brings my mind is the way we treated Al-Qaeda was we invaded Afghanistan. We're still taking out their leaders with drones, and the foot soldiers, we put them at Guantanamo.
Right.
Do we need to invade Mexico, take out the drug cartel leaders?
Absolutely not. I am against invading Mexico. I think what we need to do is we could work more cooperation with the Mexican authorities. I'm taking out some of these groups. They're as dangerous to Mexico as they are to us. And when I talk about treating them like the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, I'm talking about making them a national intelligence priority as well as a law enforcement priority.
Do you think the NSA and CIA don't, just as a matter of seeing how stable Mexico is, don't try and keep tabs on the cartels?
Well, they don't do it nearly as much as they could. Right? They also don't share information with some of the local sheriffs. When there's an issue in Sanderson or Terrell County, the first person that gets called is the sheriff, and the sheriffs aren't getting the support and the intelligence that some of our national agencies do. And that's what we should. That's one of the issues that we can fix and change to make sure that the folks that are the first line of defense have the information that they need.
Okay. Immigration is becoming, obviously, kind of it's been a hot issue, but now it appears that Congress may be ready to take it up. There are reports coming out that the Republican members of Congress, of the House of Representatives, are meeting right now, and that Boehner, the Speaker of the House, is outlining a program that, if we understand correctly, would allow not a path to citizenship, but a path to legal status to about 12 million immigrants who are here. The ones who were brought as children, through no fault of their own, possibly would have a path to citizenship. How would you react to that proposal?
Well, our present constitutional situation is if you're born here on the land, you're a citizen. We can argue or debate that if that's a proper way to go versus a just sanguineous situation of your parents, but to take folks who are already here, who are born here, they're citizens. It's their parents or somebody else who
Well, we're talking about the parents and even children who weren't born here, but were brought here when they were small.
Then they need to go home.
So you would deport all 12 million of them?
I wouldn't go and deport them right away. I would actually suggest we need to identify who they are. Apparently we know how many there are, so we must know where they are. I mean, we can find a cow with mad cow disease in Seattle, but we can't figure out who everybody is. Identify them, give them IDs, and get them back in line. Either if you're working, establish that you've got some legal, legit reason that you're here working and paying taxes and part of the system, but you can't be a citizen, you can't vote, you can't be part of the culture until you actually came through the culture correctly. And I don't think that's, at least from what I've heard, I don't think that's the direction Congress is going.
That doesn't sound like it. How about you? Well,
so first, we got to protect the border. I think we've talked about that. Don't invade Mexico, but do everything we can to strengthen that. I'm against the idea of amnesty, but we already have. There are two. One of my cover jobs when I was in the CIA was stamping visas. So during the day, I stamped visas, and at night, I went out and collected intelligence against threats to our homeland. So I can talk about the immigration process all day long. We have two different groups. You have immigrant visas, and you have non-immigrant visas. There's a lot of people already in the United States that are on a non-immigrant visa status.
And just to put things clear, we can protect the voter, but my understanding is the majority of people who are here illegally came on visas and just overstayed. But the question is, let's leave the word amnesty out. Would it be amnesty, and would you support an effort to say these people built lives here. Their children don't even know where they, they have no connection. Some of them back where their country was. Would you agree to a way that they could stay here legally, and that their children might be able to get citizenship? That seems to be a proposal.
The United States has benefited from the brain drain of every other country for the last number of decades. We should benefit from the hard-working drain as well. So I do support the idea of a guest worker program. We actually have one already. It's called the H-1A program, and I think if the State Department administers that a little bit differently, we can get people through, and that could be productive.
So people already here could just be just pulled it into that.
It's called it adjust to a H-1A or temporary worker program.
Okay.
But you shouldn't qualify for welfare. You shouldn't qualify for these other things.
How about one of the big issues here in Texas is in-state tuition for children who were brought here as children. We've already paid for their elementary and high school. Should they get it? And by the way, their parents have been paying taxes. You can't rent a house without paying real estate taxes. You can't buy anything without paying sales tax. Should they be given in-state tuition?
If you're not a Texas citizen, you shouldn't get in-state tuition, period.
Okay.
We have to start following the laws once in a while. This is why we have a president who doesn't follow the laws, because we locally...
Okay, you're going to get to run against the president.
I'm not going to run against him.
Against somebody who sides with him in November.
Right. I think this is an example where you have professional politicians making a bigger issue on things than what it is. You already have it's called an F1 visa. So you can have these kids apply for an F1 visa, and all the rules and regulations.
I'm talking about in-state tuition.
Absolutely, but if you're going to a university, you have to have a certain status, and if you have the F1 status, the rules and regulations that govern that.
Yeah. Well, I think you have mentioned you would do away with a number of departments, including the IRS. You would still have taxes. Who would collect them, and how would they police? I'm sorry, Rob. How would they police cheaters?
How would they police? I would.
There are some
I would get
Americans
rid of
who
our
cheat.
entire system of how we federally tax. I think the whole thing sets situations to allow the government to come in and deal with social situations within the market. They can set up the markets for winners and losers, and we've really got to look at how in the 30s we made a mistake, and we need to reset that so that it's based off of the fact that
they made a mistake with
the 16th Amendment and essentially establishing a federal income tax.
Okay, so you would do away with the income tax.
I would do away with the income tax completely.
Okay, and you will. Would you?
I think the IRS needs to be reduced. It would be great to be able to get rid of it completely. And I think the way you do that is you go to a low tax, low spend government. We can reduce the marginal tax rates. We can reduce the tax rate on corporate entities. That's going to bring in more money, and it's also going to attract more business to the U.S.
That obviously leads to the question of, if we cut our taxes even more than they have been, how do we fund what's going on? Give us a broad sense of what you would do away with. Medicare, Medicaid?
No, Medicare, their money was taken from them, and so they should get it back for their Medicare. The same thing with Social Security. Medicaid was not established. The federal government has no authority to take yours or mine or anybody's money to go give it to somebody else for any purpose. It's not there.
Okay, so we should do away with Medicaid.
We should get rid. If the states want to do Medicaid, let them. They can decide. The federal government has no authority to be there.
Okay. Do you agree we should do away with Medicaid?
No.
Medicaid, by the way, make sure Medicare provides care for the aged, people over 65. Medicaid for poor people.
Right. We need to go to a low tax, low spend government, right? We need to reduce federal spending, right? And that's across the board. I think we should fix it to a certain part of GDP. I think 18% makes sense. That's what it was the last time that we balanced the budget. And we need to reduce the entire pie to get to there. And then once we do that, we can start talking about each individual pie piece.
Okay.
Well, but putting it to the GDP, if our economy grew by 20% next year, which I don't think it's going to, but let's say it did, why would you think the government needs to get 20% bigger? It doesn't. We need to fund the government for the things it's supposed to do and defund it for the things it's not supposed to do.
You're a doctor. You know what some things cost. My doctor has no idea what he asked me to do an atomic stress test, and I said, I'll do it if I can competitively shop it.
There you go.
good luck.
Right.
There's no way to find out what they're going to charge you. He doesn't know, and I was unable to find out.
And that's
I'm
because
pretty good at
the government's
investigation.
involved with it.
No, it's not. I was asking the hospitals and the doctors what they would charge, and they couldn't tell me. That had nothing to do with government. So how do you do comparison shopping in the medical field?
You can't anymore because essentially the carriers, and we'll use Medicare in there too, have taken over that position to essentially arguments like, let's say all three of us are physicians from Blue Cross, you're going to get $30, you're going to get $30, I'm going to get $30. So maybe I'm the mediocre guy, the person over here I'm not going to mention is the sucky doctor, and you two are brilliant.
Okay.
Well, why everybody will want to go to you, but you're not getting anything more for what you are, right? For the value that you show.
Well,
And that's the federal government being involved with it. That's the insurance companies being involved. They've taken the market out of it.
Rick, I had a similar experience as you. I have really bad allergies, and right now here in San Antonio, they've been going haywire. And I went to get an allergy test, and they said, you know, I knew my insurance wasn't going to pay for it. I said, I'm going to pay cash. They said, no problem. I get in there, and I walk out, and I said, okay, I'm here to pay the bill. They're like, we'll bill your insurance. And I said, my insurance is not going to pay for it. And they said, well, we'll have to get back to you. And my question was, how come, you know, when I ran my business, I've been a partner in a consulting firm. We started a cybersecurity company. I know how much I bill per hour. I know what when they gave me this test, there's 20 vials of liquid. We should know how much each one of those costs. The nurse had 15 minutes of time. We should know what she bills. You know, you use this equipment, it should cost this much, and then put your margin on it, somewhere between 5 and 20%, and then that's how much it should cost.
But that's not the way it works.
Cut this short because I got one more. I want to have one. We don't have time to deal with the medical economy. One last question. I'm going to have to ask for very brief answers. We're going to have more votes on the debt ceiling. That's to authorize government to pay bills that we've already incurred. Would you vote to increase the debt ceiling?
Never.
Never.
I would not vote to increase the debt ceiling.
And what would you do in terms of the what would happen to our economy if we didn't pay our debts?
Okay, our dollar's fake.
Okay, our dollar's fake?
No, we got to reduce the size of the government. We got to reduce spending in order to pay for it.
We need to wrap out of that.
Doing what it's not supposed to do.
Will Hurd, thank you very much. Robert Lowry, thank you very much for joining us. We did, as I said, invite Mr. Canseco, who's also a candidate, and he chose not to come. And thank you very much.
Well, thanks for having us.
Thank you, Rick.
Yeah.